Magnus Carlsen recently announced that he would not be doing any FIDE organized events for the near future. But what happens when a world champion just walks away? There have been many comparisons between Magnus and Bobby Fischer, also Magnus and Garry Kasparov, who created his own rival organization to FIDE. But what are the differences between these? We're going to go over a little bit of the history, what happened, and what we can expect to see from this new turn of events. When Bobby Fischer competed in the World Championship of 1972 against Boris Spassky, tensions were already really high with FIDE. A lot of people don't know that, but he'd had some qualms with them in the past. For example, he'd spoken a lot about Soviet collusion and wanted some events to be run differently in a way that he thought would be more fair for other people competing against the Soviets. FIDE was not very amenable to his suggestions. So by the time the championship came around, he almost didn't compete. He had a lot of specific asks for the organizers in Iceland, and there was a chance that he would never have been world champion at all. However, it did happen, and he was able to win the world championship title. This also introduced a huge chess boom all around the US and honestly all around the world. You had this new exciting world champion who was doing a lot to promote the game and the sport, but then everything went south. For the next World Championship, Bobby Fischer was set to compete against Karpov. However, it didn't end up happening. There are several reasons for this, but he had some conflicts with FIDE, by the way, which is the International Chess Organizing Association, and they were not very amenable to his suggestions. For example, one of these was he wanted a 10-win system where first to 10 wins wins the title. Draws would not count, but in the case of a bunch of draws, he would also retain the title. Now, FIDE wanted their more traditional, I believe it was 24-match system, and none of this could be agreed to. This is actually a little bit comparable to Magnus himself, because Fischer really did not like the system of draws in chess. He also didn't like the idea that opponents could heavily prepare a draw. He loved the creativity and the ingenuity of the game, which is why later on he ended up inventing Fischer Random, which is a lot like Chess 960, which is where we are right now at the 960 tournament, where the pieces are set up randomly. And what this does is it takes away the importance of opening prep, because it would be impossible to prepare for all these random positions. He's very well known for this, and it was something he was extremely passionate about even later on. Anyway, because of these conflicts with FIDE, he ended up not competing in the World Championship. And he is not the only world champion to refuse to defend his title.
A bombshell from the world's best chess player, Magnus Carlsen, announcing he will not defend his title next year.
Magnus Carlsen made headlines when he chose not to defend his world champion title. However, he was still competing in FIDE events. Things started to go south around in December during the World Rapid and Blitz Championship, when he was dress coded for wearing jeans. He ended up being forfeited for a round and decided to quit the tournament altogether. Later, a photo was released of Vishy and Anand having dinner, and then he later decided to rejoin, but with the stipulation that he could wear what he wanted. There is a comparison because Bobby Fischer also had some issues with the dress code, but Magnus had a little bit more power than Fischer did against FIDE and was able to negotiate some things. But this ceasefire did not last for long. Magnus, as we know, is holding this big 960 tournament here in Weissenhaus, and he wanted to call it the World Championship of 960. Now, FIDE has ownership over World Championships, but they do not hold a 960 World Championship. So what people were thinking was, if FIDE wasn't holding it, why couldn't someone else? What FIDE was thinking is, you know, we hold all world championships, you need our permission for it. So they did a lot of negotiations, and it seemed like it would go through, and then some drama would happen, as we've seen through Twitter, through other sources. So anyway, there were a lot of tensions there, everything boiled to a head, and finally, during interviews here, Magnus said he would not be competing in FIDE organized events in the future.
Honestly, my patience with them was not very big to begin with, and it's okay. Like, they can enforce their rules. That's fine by me, and my response is that fine, then I'm out. Like, you.
Whenever there's drama like this, people always want to know what side they should take. Now, there's a lot of information on both sides, but personally, I don't feel like it's very clear-cut. Whenever a player stands up against an organization like FIDE, or whenever an organization stands up against a player, a lot of people's opinions will really just boil down to, Do they like the player? Do they like the organization? However, there is something to be said about players being able to stand up for themselves, especially when they have a lot of power like Magnus. Now, Magnus is arguably one of the most influential figures in chess history. Even Bobby Fischer didn't have a lot of influencing power against FIDE. As we saw, his demands were not heard and he ended up not playing in the World Championship. It's not clear exactly how much power Magnus has against FIDE, but people have talked about, is a player bigger than the game? Can a player ever be bigger than the game? The answer is most likely not. Is the drama and scandal done? Is this the end of the issue? Will Magnus compete in a FIDE organized event again? I personally hope he does. I think he's great for the sport. That being said, we don't know, but I'm sure we'll find out soon.